Welcome in to the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe, presented by BetOnline. I'm Ross Geiger, the former NBA video coordinator, having spent times with the Bucks, Suns, and Knicks. And I'm joined alongside Bruce Bernstein, our four-time Emmy Award winner, who spent more than 3 decades at ESPN producing NBA shows, SportsCenter, and soaking up knowledge from the best hoop analysts in the business. And also joining us, per usual, is the 2-time Emmy Award winner, Michael Worldby Freer, who is a senior writer at Stat Factor, specializing in writing advanced statistical NBA reports for various announcers across the league. This is episode number 129, the Paolo Banchero episode, as the former first overall pick and rookie of the year continues to improve his overall game, and he's currently averaging 29 points per game so far this season. Both Worldby and the Orlando Magic are hoping he can return to the court from injury as soon as possible, as he has gotten off to a tremendous start. Before things get rolling here tonight, just a quick reminder, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NFL, NBA, NHL, to entertainment and political props, head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. And tonight, fellas, this show's theme is an early season edition of What's Wrong with Blank. And so no better time to get started with this show after we just saw the Milwaukee Bucks lose in Cleveland on Monday night, 116-114, dropping their record early on in the season to 1-6. And this also includes a loss at home against the Cavaliers just on Saturday night, where Damian Lillard tallied up 41 points, which included 10 of 15 from downtown to go along with 9 assists. And the Greek freak himself, Giannis Antetokounmpo, chipping in 34 points, 16 rebounds, and 9 assists himself. So I understand the Cavs are a hot team right now, maybe arguably the hottest team in the NBA, but not even a night like that could get the Bucks over the hump in this one. So Bruce, I'll start with you. I know that you watched tonight's Bucks game in Cleveland. What's just your overall thoughts from what you saw and what you're seeing so far this season?
Well, the Bucks have had, I'm going to give them a little bit of slack here. They have had a very challenging schedule. I mean, that's the second time they've had to play Cleveland, who's 8-0 after Monday night. The combined record of the teams that they've lost to, which is now 6 straight, is 29-11. Okay. So, they've had to play some, again, it's not just Cleveland. There's been some other teams that they've had to play as well. They look really disorganized on offense. They just looked a step slow in every aspect of the game against Cleveland. Giannis didn't play. Dame was good at times. Darius Garland, who I used to call and probably will again, Kyrie 2.0, just torched them on Monday night. They just look like a team that's just like in search of an identity, and the stuff that they're doing just isn't working. I mean, they had a great rally on Monday night against Cleveland in the third quarter, and they were leading like late in the game. It looked like they had all the momentum and they were going to actually pull this off. And then they just collapsed down the stretch. It's got to be frustrating for Ross and his fellow Bucks fans watching those guys.
Yeah, it totally is. And the excuse of, hey, we've got a new coach, we're transitioning, kind of the leadership here, that's been thrown out the window. I mean, this team has had all offseason to gear up, a lot of returning players, to be quite honest. And I was actually one of the guys that was pretty excited and optimistic about Taurean Prince, who I think has still been solid, and DeLon Wright, but haven't seen much from the other counterpieces on this team. But Worldby, what's your thoughts on the Bucks so far this season, and do you see them turning this thing around?
At this point, I'm really not sure. The defense is the biggest issue for me. Mm-hmm. This is a team, they're bottom 10 in defensive efficiency. They're bottom 10 in defending shooters. Opponent effective field goal percentage is way up there. I mean, this team they have not been a good defensive team since Doc took over. They're a sub 500 team. I've mentioned this before since he came aboard. And now it just, the games under 500 continues to grow. They're getting nothing out of anybody beside Giannis and Dame, Monday notwithstanding, because Bobby Portis had a terrific game. I think he finished with 21 and 18. But coming into Monday, he was averaging 11 points a game. I mean, you need depth. You need quality players to back up Giannis and Dame, and they're not getting it for the most part this season. But for me, what stands out is their defense. They're just, it wasn't but a few seasons ago, this was one of the best defensive teams in the league. And for a couple of years, they were the best defensive team in the league. And that's all gone now. They're bottom 10. They're going even further down. Bruce is right. They play a difficult schedule to start, but this is supposed to be a season ago. They were the contenders along with the Celtics for the East and for the NBA title. What happened? I mean, now we're worried because they're playing too many tough teams. They were the tough team that you were supposed to be going up against. Now it's a totally different story. I don't know where they go from here, but for me, it starts with defense.
Gary Trent came over, right, guys, and he was expected to be, a nice contributor. He has been horrible. Absolutely horrible. He was horrible again on Monday night. 1 out of 7 from the floor, only 4 points. I mean, this guy is he's averaging like under 9 a game. His career average is 14. I mean, in a lot of those games, he's just been crap.
Yeah, Gary Trent Jr. is one of the guys that is always among the leaders in steals in the NBA, and certainly is not providing that this year. And I know Giannis was out here tonight, so a little different circumstances with rotation, but I think we're starting to see some tweaks and adjustments made by Doc Rivers, at least trying to see who else can bring energy to this team. We saw it tonight from AJ Green, their second year man. He had 21 points, played 33 minutes to only Gary Trent's 20. And then Andre Jackson Jr., the former UConn wing, he provides a lot of energy, athleticism, and obviously I think can at least bring some more effort to the defensive side of the ball as well. Has an ability to block shots and kind of fly all over the place. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on now. As an optimistic Bucks fan, and I've been seeing it on Bucks Twitter quite a bit here lately, they want to see the young guys play, and I think Doc's about to unleash the young guys, and we'll see guys like Gary Trent Jr. His minutes might diminish until he shows some life. And DeLon Wright, another guy who obviously they had big expectations for as a backup guard. He played just 4 minutes tonight. Now, granted, Dame had 36, played 37 minutes, but he took a back seat. So, Worldby, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, is that just they have very slim options here. They don't have a lot of trade assets. They don't have picks. You just got to hope and pray that your young guys can come to the rescue.
Yeah, I mean, the window for success with this team is really small. I mean, and now with the Cavaliers being arguably the most impressive team this season, them and perhaps the Thunder, those two. I mean, you got the Knicks they're playing okay to start the season. The Celtics are being the South. Your window to contend in the East is really getting smaller and smaller. And you mentioned they got to find shooting. Offensively, they have to find shooting. They're shooting 31% on above the break 3-pointers, from that area. That's not going to cut it from any team, let alone a team like the Bucks that needs to contend. So you got to find somebody who can drill it. I thought it was going to be Lillard because he'd been really struggling from 3-point range until the other night when he finally had a great game from 3-point range, and he followed up with a solid game on Monday. But they absolutely need that every night now from him. It's tough. It's a lot of pressure, but too bad. You came from Portland where it was a lousy situation. You gotta have this pressure. It's gotta be on you and Giannis if nobody else is going to step up.
Just one last number on Lillard. One of my thoughts going into Monday was that I wanted to see a little bit more playmaking out of him, where he might, drive the paint and kick it out to some shooters. And I think he did some of that on Monday night, but he also had 8 turnovers, Cleveland as a team had 10, Dame had 8 on his own. So that in a 2-point game, every one of those turnovers crushed him.
By the way, look at these two teams. Speaking of, not to.
Uh-oh.
I think we
Internet
lost Will
problems.
for a second. I'll pick up for him here because with Damian Lillard, Bruce, I'm glad that you pointed out the turnover problems with him tonight. He had more turnovers than assists, 7 assists to 8 turnovers. And like you said, in a close ball game, that is not going to cut it here. But speaking of a team that needs shooting, let's move on here to the Denver Nuggets. They are 3-3 on the season. Jamal Murray is missing his second straight game here Monday night due to concussion protocol, but it certainly isn't coming at a great time for head coach Michael Malone's Nuggets, is it, Bruce?
No, I mean, look, it's funny when they let Bruce Brown leave after the 23 season, and then they let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope leave this past summer. More on him in a little while. They've just, they ownership is just chipping away at what they have. I mean, look, Joker is the steadiest player on the planet. He is just unbelievable. Whatever's going on, he's not going to be MVP this year. But listen to what his numbers are. Career high, 37.7 minutes a game. All right. Most he's ever played. Averaging almost a triple-double. 29.8, 12.3 rebounds, 9.8 assists. Okay. He's the rock, but they need to make more threes on that team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a team, and look, Caldwell-Pope wasn't a great 3-point shooter, although he did shoot 40% last year, which is above average for sure. But they just, their defense is so mediocre, they gotta outscore you to win games. And the way their offense is going, they're not doing it.
No, and especially not without Jamal Murray, a key loss for this group. One of the bigger guys when it comes to scoring the basketball for this team and helping create out of that pick and roll with the Joker. But one bright spot I do love with this team, Christian Brown has been tremendous all season long. He's been one of my favorite players to watch this season. I'm not sure, Bruce, did you get a chance to see his dunk? He put Rudy Gobert on a poster the other night, and they got into a little pushing match after that as he stared him down. But really like the energy he brings. He looks like he's trying to, on the fly, improve his 3-point shooting percentage, and he seems to be that one glimmer of hope for this team. But outside of that, I'm not seeing it. I mean, Michael Porter Jr. is up and down. He's been a roller coaster ride his entire career. Unfortunately, some of that due to some serious injuries, but they paid this man a lot of money to help produce for this team, and I'm just not seeing it.
No, and I mean, look, you mentioned Jamal Murray, who's missing another game. He's been, look, he's probably been physically hurting a little bit, which would account for some of his lack of production. But he's fourth leading scorer on the team. I mean, he's behind Joker, he's behind Porter, he's behind Aaron Gordon, and he's just, his 3-point shooting for the season is at 30%. So hopefully he can get himself healthy and get his mojo back, because if Jamal Murray's not their second best player, I don't think things are clicking properly on that team. He shouldn't be their 4th leading scorer.
No, not at all. And you have to wonder, is this a front office that kind of regrets giving out all the paydays that they did? Because they're kind of stuck with this very long term. I mean, the Bucks are a little bit too with Dame and Chris and Giannis, but they at least have Brook Lopez coming off the books. These guys went and extended Aaron Gordon. They've extended Jamal Murray. They've extended the Joker, of course, and Michael Porter Jr. has his money. So they're kind of stuck with those 4. So it's either get healthy, turn things around, or it's going to be a long couple of years for, I guess we can't call them a dynasty, but a dying championship team.
I think I said last week, I had figured them as a solidly 3rd best team in the West this year, behind OKC and Minnesota. Minnesota also, by the way, isn't exactly lighting it up. And I know we're going to talk about them in a little while too. But I like Minnesota better than I like Denver at this point. I mean, to me, Denver looks like, other than Joker, I mean, where would they be without Joker? I mean, they might not have a win.
Yeah, they might be winless.
They might be over.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that team that you mentioned there, Bruce, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They are 3-3 to start the season thus far. But to me, this is simply just a tough stretch of the schedule, kind of like we talked about the Bucks. I mean, they had to start the season on the road, opening up in LA against the Lakers with the whole Bronny and LeBron extravaganza going on there. And then their second game was in Sacramento for the Kings home opener. We both know that crowd gets rowdy for their Sacramento Kings. So another tough one there. And then they, of course, took care of Toronto in their home opener, as they should have. And then they had a tough 3-game stretch leading up to this week. And that was a loss at home to Dallas, who obviously was the Western Conference Finals champions last year. They beat the Denver Nuggets at home, so that's a good win for them. And then they most recently fell to San Antonio on Saturday night, but San Antonio played a good game. Chris Paul's had a good 2-game stretch for this group. So where do you stand on this team? I mean, how much do you think this is just an adjustment to the fact that they made a major trade right before the season started?
That's really sort of my top line thought about them, actually. It has been an uneven start for them. It's understandable. You have Karl Anthony Towns now in New York. Julius Randle replaces him. Big difference in those two guys. They were 3-3 heading into Monday's game against Charlotte. Let's see. What were they doing in that game? They were tied at the end of the first quarter with Charlotte, so they're struggling there too. And I think they're going to be fine. I think they just kind of have to learn to play together. They're well coached. They were the best defensive team in the league, as World B would remind us constantly last season. But, Towns and Kyle Anderson are gone. The new guys, Randle and DiVincenzo, they're more offensive oriented than stoppers on D. And, they're still, and despite having Rudy and Naz Reid at center, their rebound differential so far this season is -3. So, they're being out-rebounded. So the defense and rebounding is their forte. Hopefully they'll get it together after a little more time to play together, right?
Yeah. I think that's some fixable issues there. World B, what's your thoughts on the Minnesota Timberwolves? Obviously got off to a 500 start, 3-3 on the season, but how much of that would you say is just part of the transition period of, inserting big name players into the mix after making that Karl Anthony Towns trade?
Yeah, I think that goes along with it. As Bruce sort of alluded to, the defense isn't there yet. They're, in the bottom half of the league entering Monday in defensive efficiency, but we're in week 2. It's not that big a deal. They had a nice win against the Nuggets, came from 10 down in like 4 minutes to go and pulled that game out. But sandwiched around that were a loss to the Mavericks and loss to the Spurs, where their defense was non-existent. Combined, I think it was 120 points per 100 possessions. So the defense isn't there. You would figure it would be. Nothing wrong with Julius Randle. His game has been excellent so far. He's shooting lights out from 3-point range. He's the Julius Randle we saw with the Knicks before he got hurt. They're just having trouble from the perimeter offensively. Dante DiVincenzo is 30% on 3, 31%. Michael Conley is 30%. So these are 2 main guys you need to shoot, and they're not getting it right now. You had that with Towns. Obviously, he was a great 3-point shooter. Julius Randle is shooting great, from 3-point range. So the issue is not with him so far. It's everybody else is going to get it together. Dante DiVincenzo is not a 30% shooter. Michael Conley is not a 30% shooter from 3. You expect it's a long season. We're in week 2. I expect things to get better, but right now they're not playing nearly what we expect from a team that I said was going to represent the West in the NBA Finals.
I mentioned that they're like -3 plus/minus in rebounding. What is that translated to? Well, it's translated to the fact that their opponents take 6.5 more shot attempts per game than they do. Okay, that's a stat that I really kind of like to look at when I'm, doing the comparative, stats on, because if your opponents are taking 6.5 more shots a game than you are, there's a potential there for them to pick up like 8-10 points just from that differential. And, Minnesota's not getting blown out in the games that they've lost. They've been close. So yeah, they got to control the defensive boards, not give up so many second chance points. And, Anthony Edwards, I've got to give it to him. I mean, he's really been, dynamic for them and, good shooting numbers from the floor. The one thing I think he needs to kind of make sure he stays focused on is his free throw shooting. He's only shooting 62% from the line so far this year.
Yeah.
And in the game they lost to Dallas, which was a 6-point loss, he missed 6 free throws. So, I mean, that's not the reason they lost, but, you know, if they'd have gotten 4 of those free throws to go in, it would have been a 1-possession thing, right? So, the little things, you know, but they're going to be fine. I mean, they've got the talent there.
And by the way, I mentioned the defense isn't there yet. And the reason I think it will be there, if you watch that Denver game that they pulled out, Rudy Gobert, I know he made all the highlights because he got in that confrontation with Christian Braun after he got dunked on or whatever, which was a whole lot about nothing. Christian Braun was acting like a punk on that play. And I never a problem as much as Rudy is, you know, a little over the top for me sometimes. He didn't do anything wrong for me in that mix. You watch the end of that game, though. His defense on the perimeter of all things. We're told that Rudy only protects the middle. That's the only thing he does, and he wins the Defensive Player of the Year. Watch at the end of that game. He's playing out on the perimeter. He's defending all the way down the sideline there and causing them to take a lousy shot, the Nuggets, at the end of the game. That was all Rudy, and he gave a real glimpse as to why he is one of the best defensive players this league has really ever seen.
Yeah, and having him anchor that defense is going to only help them turn this around, and I think it's totally fixable. We're all on the same page there. And kind of back to Bruce with you, they're missing out on 6 extra shots a game. Those could be going to Anthony Edwards, who's been letting it fly from deep here this season. He leads the entire NBA so far in three-pointers made at 32. Second closest would be LaMelo Ball and Buddy Hield, both at 30. So speaking of teams that don't play defense, but hoping to have some success, let's talk about the Indiana Pacers out east, because the Indiana Pacers are 2-4 to start the season. And as well as this team can score the ball, my question is how much of their rough start could be due to Halliburton's shooting struggles and just having a defense that just can't get stops when it's needed the most down the stretch, Bruce?
They're, you know, kind of like Minnesota. Their rebounding has been horrible this year.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. Their opponents grab 14.5 offensive rebounds per game. That is the worst in the league. All right. They're out rebounded by nearly 5 a game, 4th worst in the league. On Friday, in a 7-point loss to the Pelicans, they were -9 in offensive rebounds. Okay. With Yves Missi grabbing 6 on his own. Okay. Matching Indiana's entire total of offensive rebounds by one guy. And, oh, by the way, as shitty as their rebounding is, they give up a ton of points. I mean, 4th worst in the league. Their opponents' field goal percentage isn't horrendous, but Indiana's opponents, again, like Minnesota, their opponents take way more shots per game than Indiana does. So Tyrese Halliburton needs to make a shot, too. I have felt that Benedict Matherin's been pretty good so far. I had high hopes for him this season, and so far he is putting up numbers. But, yeah, guard somebody, would you?
Yep. World B?
Well, you've heard me talk about it to no end. They're a great offensive team, and they are just awful defensively. They were awful last season. This is a complete opposite of Minnesota here. Minnesota defense isn't great, but we expect it to get better. Indiana's defense is worse, and there's really no sign of it getting better. They're terrible in the paint, defending in the middle. Now, in fairness, they've lost a couple of bigs that they probably figured would be a part of this rotation, or at least, you know, James Wiseman, who got hurt early, and Isaiah Jackson, both with Achilles injuries. That doesn't help their situation in the middle. But that being said, as Bruce mentioned, worst defensive rebounding team in the league by far, only grabbing 65% of available defensive rebounds. So what does that mean? That means they're bottom 5 in opponents' second chance points per game. They're bottom 10 in opponents' points per game in the paint. They just can't stop in the interior. They can't grab rebounds. They can't stop opponents in there. And according to NBA.com, they're playing more defense than they have been before. This is how desperate it is. They're trying to do anything to protect the middle. They played more zone defense possessions, I think, this year, according to NBA.com. 14 possessions playing the zone defense. That's more than they played all last season. So they're trying Rick Carlisle doing whatever he can to try and protect the middle, but so far it's just not working.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to see more of Jerice Walker. I think Rick Carlisle is kind of in a certain position as Doc Rivers, not as drastic as far as changes that need to be made, but trying to find some energy off that bench to help in the rebounding or help with the defense. Jerice Walker, I think, deserves that opportunity to do so, especially when their front line is injured with the Wiseman news and things of that nature. And Isaiah Jackson's got to step it up too. He's a guy that they had paid this offseason to keep around, and so far hasn't really produced that much. So hopefully they can get that figured out, because they're going to have to play some defense if we're going to keep them in serious consideration with some of the top teams out east. Well,
before we started, I'm sorry. Just one real quick thing, and then I'm sorry.
No,
before we started tonight, we were talking a little bit about Jonas Valanciunas and how, what the heck is he doing in Washington? Well, it sounds like, if there's a place that might want to, acquire him, Indiana might be a team that could use him, because they're so thin up front, even if he's only playing half the game, he could help them on the board. So, yeah.
I agree there, Bruce. And Indiana was a team that they've partnered up with on trades before. As you may remember, Bilal Coulibaly was actually drafted by the Pacers and traded to the Wizards. So there is a good relationship there. So keep an eye out on that. Good point. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break and come back with you for the second half. And we're back here on 48 Minutes, and let's go ahead and talk about some players in terms of this early season edition of What's Wrong with Blank. And we're going to start off with a big-time star, and that is Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs. Now, he did have a tremendous game late last week where he had 5 blocks, 5 steals, and really filled up the stat sheet. But overall on the season, he's averaging just 18 points per game, only shooting 42.7% from the field, and a lowly 22% from downtown. Bruce, do you have any concerns, or is this just a early season blunder?
Well, you mentioned he's only making 22% on threes, and he's 7'3". So, maybe, get closer to the hoop and things will get a little bit better for you. I mean, look, one of the areas that I think he's really lacked so far is his rebounding.
Yes.
Outside of that 20 rebound game that he had against Houston last week, he's been in single digits for rebounds in every other game. I mean, he averaged double digits as a rookie. So, he's not grabbing boards like he needs to. And on Monday night, they're playing at the Clippers late, and it's going to be really interesting because he's going to go up against Ivica Zubac, who's been playing great for the Clippers this year. He's a little bit more of a sturdy physical guy than Wemby is. So it'll be interesting to see if Wemby tries to go inside. Is he going to get pushed around a little bit by that guy? And is he going to be forced to go back out on the perimeter to get his shots? That'll be a really interesting one-on-one challenge for Wemby.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I thought Chris Paul was going to help make Wemby's job easier, but that hasn't been the case thus far. So, what are your thoughts on Wemby, and are you have any concerns with the development this year or lack thereof?
I'm mixed about him. On the one hand, he's still a hugely impactful player on the Spurs defense. They're top 5 in the league in defensive efficiency all of a sudden again. When he's on the court, they're giving up less than a point per possession, which is really impressive. When he's off the court, they're giving up 118 points per 100 possessions. So, I mean, he's having a huge impact as we expect him to have. My biggest issue is, Bruce mentioned, he's shooting poorly. You mentioned too, Ross. He's shooting poorly from 3-point range. That's not the worst part about it. The worst part is he's shooting way more than he probably should. Entering Monday, 46% of his field goal attempts were from 3-point range. Now, he's got an all-around game that we've seen him do, and he does have the ability to hit threes, but he's not – you don't need him taking almost half his shots from 3-point range. Percentage of scoring from in the paint last season was 47%. This season it's down to less than 42 or less than 43. Excuse me. That's just, you want him in the paint more. He has that ability to stretch his game out. No question about it. We saw it last year. We saw it in the Olympics at times. He had a great game in the gold medal game against the United States. But he is 46% of your shots coming from 3-point range is way too much.
Yeah, and I don't want to compare the players here, World B, but sooner or later, if he keeps this up with the attempts from three, you're going to start having the same spiel for Wemby as you did with AD.
Absolutely, no question. I don't know if this is by design. I don't know if Pop is just like going crazy on the sidelines watching him shoot, or that's the plan to stretch his game out, let him develop it out there. It's not working right now for sure. He's tall enough that he can shoot when he's defended, because how many players are going to block that shot from out there? But he's absolutely not hitting. And me personally, just like you mentioned with AD, I want to see him mid-range and in, please, right now.
All the things that we've sort of been saying, negative. The Spurs are 3-3 after 6 games, by the way. And if they get anywhere close to 500 this year, that will be way in excess of what anybody predicted for that team. So let's just say that, I think Wemby's going to be fine. And in the next week plus, the Spurs are going to have some very winnable games. They're going to host the Blazers, the Jazz, and the Wizards. So talk to me after that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is going to be a big week for them to show what they really are about this year, and they're going to do it with some adversity. And our thoughts that definitely go out to their head coach, Greg Popovich, who has left the team due to some health concerns. So they have an interim coach, Mitch Johnson, stepping in to coach this team. So it should be interesting to see how a young guy that's never coached before in the league, and Coach Johnson continues to try to lead this group. Obviously, there's a ton of veterans on this team. I think the beauty in this is you've got Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes to kind of help navigate the season with these youngsters. So a big week ahead, and definitely this week should tell us a lot about the Spurs moving forward and Wemby. Now, next up, we've got Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. This is almost like a combo one. We have to mention both of them here because the Philadelphia 76ers are 1-4 on the season. They did get some good news here on Monday as Paul George is set to make his Sixers debut tonight in Phoenix, which is definitely going to be a tough matchup for them, but at least a big step in the right direction for this franchise. But World I'll start with you on this question. Is there any part of the Philly organization that regrets giving Joel Embiid his contract extension?
Maybe. I mean, only because the problem is you're taking a risk with him being injured. It's not because he doesn't want to be on the court. It's not because he's not losing his touch as a player. He's still, last season he was a dominating player. He averaged almost a point per minute when he was on the court. It's unbelievable. For a time, he was averaging more points per 48 minutes than the record holder Will Chamberlain back in the season, which he averaged 50 points a game. For most of the season when he was on the court, Joel Embiid was ahead of that pace. He's tailed off a little bit, and he only played in 39 games, so it didn't work out that way. But the thing with Joel Embiid, and his antics grow on me. He's the reason my man Mitchell Robinson isn't on the court yet for the Knicks after what he did to him in the playoffs. So I don't exactly have a warm spot for Joel Embiid. But that being said, Philly fans got to remember where they were, where this franchise was before he came aboard. The season that he got drafted, or the season that preceded the draft when he got drafted, they won 19 games. And then he missed his first 2 seasons because of injury or whatever. That last season before he took the court, they won 10 games before him. Now he's there. They've made the playoffs 7 straight years, 7 straight seasons in a row. No, they haven't been to a conference final. No, they haven't been to an NBA final. And there are expectations for this season. But Philly fans got to remember where you were before the process and all that silliness started and where you are now. It's not where you want to be, but it's a heck of a lot better than where you were. And Joel Embiid is responsible for a huge, huge part of that.
Yeah, back then they were trusting the process. And now, Bruce, I ask you, should they trust this process with Joel Embiid?
Look, Phillies fans, who are known to be tough on players and Santa Claus and God knows what else, they're very frustrated with Embiid, and they have their reasons for feeling that way. But I feel like, Embiid, who's been in his feelings lately, I think he has reasons for that as well. I mean, look, they lost 4 out of 5 to start the season. As you mentioned, PG makes his debut on Monday night against the Suns. health was always going to be an issue with this team. I mean, before the season began, we said, if they stay healthy, well, the early signs are not good. Now, some have questioned why Embiid played in the Olympics, but he isn't ready to play for the start of the season. A very legitimate question by the fans in Philadelphia. I don't know the answer to it, but, the whole thing got very weird a few days ago because now after, Embiid basically telling the fans, look, I've always left it out there on the court, and he has. He's always played injured. He's always tried to come back too soon because he's always tried to help the team. I think his heart is in the right place as a teammate. His body, has oftentimes failed him. But when the Philly columnist brings up his son and his deceased brother in a negative column, that was really over the line. And I mean, I'm sure that writer wishes that he could do a do-over on that. And I think he even did apologize. That was Bush League all the way. This guy's had an injury-plagued career. He always tried to play. I think now that he's making over $50 million a year, fans are looking at his money, but fail to understand that he's always battled injuries and he's not getting any younger. Okay. Maybe they're not going to win 50, but if they can get to the postseason with Embiid and George healthy, along with the incredible Tyrese Maxey, I mean, you're not going to want to play that team in the playoffs if they're healthy. With just those three guys, they could win a series.
Yeah, and no question. And it's going back to that same if, though. You said if they're healthy, and as we know, the best ability is availability. And whether or not that ever comes to fruition with Philadelphia, with not just Joel Embiid, but to be fair, Paul George. I mean, obviously he's set to debut here tonight, but what kind of stretch of games are we going to get out of him now? Is he going to play 10, maybe 20 straight, or are we going to see some nights off here? So stay tuned, buckle up, Philly fans.
Yeah, Bruce mentioned it, part of the problem, or part of the frustration, I should say, of Philly fans is watching Joel Embiid, in this past summer's Olympics. And not just play, he was dominating for most of the stretch. I mean, they don't win some of those, the games in Serbia when they made the big comeback without MD playing as great as he did. And you watch him at his greatness. You watch his greatness in those games, and then you see him not being able to take the floor. I don't question anybody's health as far as NBA players go, or any athletes. Your health is your health, and you got to protect it. But that's where the frustration, I think, a lot of it lies. Is, geez, I just watched you play a few months ago, and you were outstanding, and now Steph Curry can get on the court, although he missed some time with injury. LeBron James hasn't missed time. Anthony Davis hasn't missed time. How come you're missing time? It's probably their mindset, and they need to pump the brakes a little bit, because they know, it's always cross your fingers with Joel Embiid and health whenever you're a Phillies fan watching him on the court.
Yeah, no question about that. And speaking of frustrating, World B, let's talk about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with the Orlando Magic. And Bruce, I might be starting a rumor on this show here tonight, but do you think KCP maybe stole some of the juice in Denver and brought it to Orlando and is sipping on the same juice as those in Denver are? Because this guy is shooting 21% from the three-point line right now. So what's going on with KCP?
I really believed that him joining the Magic would make a huge difference in Orlando. It really did. I mean, last season they were 7th worst in points scored and tied for 29th with 14-win Detroit in three-pointers made. I mean, they were at the absolute bottom of the barrel. Caldwell-Pope was a 40% three-point shooter last season, a double-digit scorer for his career, 2 championship rings, yada, yada, yada. Seemed like a great fit for a young team that won 47 games. He's the oldest guy on their roster at 31 years old. But it really looks like he's just dropped off drastically from last season. I mean, it's still early, but he's averaging 6 points a game he's getting fewer than 2 buckets a game. He's getting like a 1.9 buckets a game. I mean, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, you can't be serious. He's also just playing 28 minutes a game, and he's committing more fouls than in any of his previous seasons. So my question now is his decline has been alarming? Is he kind of all of a sudden just fallen off the cliff as a player, or is he going to bounce back? I honestly don't know, because with Banchero out for another couple of weeks, this was when he was going to have to step up a little bit. And so far, we haven't seen it. Yeah,
we both have questions. I know that you watch the Magic probably more than we do. Caldwell-Pope is only 31 years old. So do you think this is a decline or just an adjustment?
I think it's a little of both. I think, he's showing his age here. And I also think, for me personally, watching him and looking at the numbers, his shot selection is not what we're used to seeing. We thought he was going to come aboard and be a really good perimeter shooter, help this team. As Bruce mentioned, they struggled so badly from the perimeter. It hasn't happened yet. You're really 7 of 27 on 7 of 32 on threes to start the season, just 22%. That's not going to last. If it did, he's going to be sitting on the bench for these games. You're not going to have somebody shooting 22% when you're big free agent signing. But here's one thing: we look at him as a 3-point specialist, but he hasn't really been that. That hasn't been the case for him in his career. This season, so far, almost 80% of his shots are from 3-point range. That's easily going to be a career high for him at that pace. And only 4.8, less than 5% of his scoring comes from mid-range. Last season, that was over 13%. We think Caldwell-Pope is just standout spot up shooter. It's not the case. He's only taken 2 mid-range jumpers all season. I expect the shot selection's got to change a little bit. And I think, it's one of those things, start making some shots from inside, maybe it gets you comfortable and you can hit some from outside. So I think once he gets comfortable and finds his shot a little bit better, they're going to need him now, as you mentioned, because I don't expect Banchero back for another month with an oblique injury, tear, as it were. So they're going to need scoring. They're going to need Franz Wagner to become a big guy, and they're going to need KCP to become that guy. It's as simple as that if they want to keep stay afloat in the playoff chase.
Yeah, no question about that. And I think it is just an adjustment to the flow, the spacing, and as good as Paolo Banchero is and how well he can pass the ball, it's just a different system, not having the joker, the best passer in the game, kind of feeding you the ball. So hopefully he can step up here big, because right now I don't see much of a difference between KCP and what they have in Gary Harris, who I know is still part of the team, but he was supposed to be a big improvement over Gary Harris, slotting into some of those minutes.
And now Gary Harris is seeing some minutes again because they need help right now, and he's not providing it, but they need something right now because they're not getting it. It's a tough schedule to start out too. I mean, they had to go to Dallas the other night and got the doors blown off them right away. But these are games where you need a KCP to step up and be that guy. And we're not looking for him to be Banchero, but we need him to be a stopgap, need him to put a Band-Aid on the situation right now from a lot of guys, but especially your big free agent signing.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of someone who needs help, Bruce, I'm going to tee you up nicely on this one for you to take a swing right off the tee box here. And a guy that needs some help is Grant Williams. You can take it from here.
Look, he acted out. They played Boston on consecutive nights in Charlotte on Friday and Saturday night. And, that's an unusual setup. Yeah. I think, there were some tentative plans for some of his former Celtics teammates to come to his house or meet up after that first game. But after the open field tackle that he threw on Jason Tatum on Friday night, which pretty much everyone on Boston took exception to, as a Celtics fan, I watched that, and it was just such a weird, bizarre thing to do in a game that was already decided. You don't want to hurt a guy, and Tatum bounced right up, and you could see he was pissed because he didn't look at him. He just marched right to the foul line and did it. But here's the thing. When Grant Williams was in Boston, he was a really kind of a lovable guy if you were a Celtics fan. He played hard. He had some great playoff moments. He played well against Milwaukee in the playoffs one year, had a great game and guarded Giannis, and people kind of respected his scrappiness. But I think this guy, his feelings were hurt that he was not kept on the team for one more year when they won the championship. I think there was a lot of jealousy in his head there. I think he was angry and bitter. He went to Dallas and he got traded to Charlotte. Meanwhile, the Celtics look like a team that could win another championship this year, and who knows after that. I think, it was immature. I think there was jealousy involved. And, I mean, dude needs a hug.
Yeah, he definitely does, and I wonder how much he meshed with that team too, because the video surfaced of a late game, post game a couple seasons ago with Deuce Tatum, Jason's son, and he refused to give Grant Williams a high five there. So, World B, I ask you, do you think there's maybe some stuff internally with Grant Williams that he just doesn't vibe well with a lot of players around the league? Because all reports out of Dallas was not a good situation either. They wanted Grant out of town. So is he just a bad bee in the bee's nest there, or what?
Well, without knowing the inside dope on everything, you look at perception from the outside. Yeah, I mean, 3 teams in 2 seasons. I mean, that's basically. I joke with you guys a couple weeks ago about Dante DiVincenzo when he was, had a little beef with assistant coach Rick Brunson of the Knicks, and I point out, hey, 5 teams in 4 seasons for Dante. There's a reason behind that. It's not a great contract. Well, here's Grant Williams going from. He was the big guy. They got Porzingis,
Yeah,
and they sent Grant Williams over there. That was a big deal. That was a big part of the deal, and he doesn't even make it a full season. They send him to Charlotte to get PJ Washington, who becomes a major player for their run to the finals. I mean, it was a punk move the other night. That's you can't say it any differently. It was a punk move, and it's not the first time we've seen that from him since he left Boston. As Bruce mentioned, we didn't hear about this while I was in this Boston. Maybe it's the maybe it's the organization. But yeah, I mean, think about it. He comes to Dallas, and he's in this situation where he can play more. He could be a player, and then immediately, before the season's out, he's in Charlotte. Last season, that's like being sent to Siberia. In the NBA circles, and he was having a good, he was a big part of their rotation with Charlotte. Averaged 14 a game in his time there. He was having a good start this season, but he's a fouling machine this season, top 5 in fouls. He just 14 technicals last season. I mean, he's playing like a punk, and now it just, it showed up big time on Friday night.
Yeah, it's been a tough stretch for Grant Williams, and now they're without both Mark Williams and Nick Richards. So Grant Williams is playing the 5 position. So that's not going to help the fouls for Grant Williams there as he tries to battle with much bigger and taller guys down low. But hopefully he can turn things around and stop this attention-seeking madness, because it's not
I'm not
going
to be on the edge of my seat waiting for that one. I'll tell you that.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll be on the edge of your seat for this. We're going to get to our final thoughts here, and Bruce, I'll let you lead us off.
When Klay Thompson left Golden State as a free agent after 13 years with the franchise, only 11 playing because he missed 2 full seasons, but he was there for 13 years. I felt like it signaled the beginning of the end of the Warriors as we knew them. The legendary Splash Brothers, who led the Dubs to 4 championships between 2015 and 22, were now on separate teams. And how could that be good for the Warriors? Well, enter 8-year veteran Buddy Hield, who joined the Dubs as part of a 6-team trade after a season in Philadelphia. Who knew that he'd not only be an upgrade over Klay Thompson, but he'd lead the team in scoring while shooting better than 51% from three-point range? That's right. He's averaging more points than Stephen Curry, who was recently sidelined for a week but returned on Monday night in the win over Washington. Warriors are 6-1. They're nipping at the heels of OKC at the top of the West. Hield is averaging a career-best 22.2 points, 10 more than he averaged last year, okay? He may be the single biggest reason that the Warriors are exceeding expectations in the first part of the season. He came off the bench again on Monday, and he scored 20 off the bench, 8 in his first 6 minutes of the first quarter. And while it would be highly unusual for a 31-year-old veteran to win Most Improved Player award in their 9th NBA season, Hield might actually pull it off.
He really might. And let's not also discount the fact he might win 6th Man of the Year by a landslide right now, given the numbers that you just presented to us. So great points there, Bruce. World B?
Yeah, when JB Bickerstaff got let go at the end of last season by the Cleveland Cavaliers, I was, like most everybody else, stunned because they've been having such a good run. and they bring in Kenny Atkinson. And I'm telling you what, the most impressive team I've seen in the NBA this season by far, I'm sorry, Thunder fans, has been the Cleveland Cavaliers. They remain undefeated, and it's not just that they're undefeated. They're beating teams bad, and they're beating good teams. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks aren't necessarily qualified as a good team, but they just finished a home over them. They've beaten the Knicks along the way in the Garden. They've blown away the Magic, albeit without Paolo Banchero on Friday night, but they're putting teams away, and we were waiting for Evan Mobley to become that next big time, take that leap, because they signed a lot of guys in the offseason. They re-signed Donovan Mitchell, the big bucks. They re-signed Jared Allen, the big bucks. They re-signed Evan Mobley on a team that hadn't gotten very far. We've been waiting. Who are they going to pick up to make this team better? They stuck with everybody, and it's paying off big time, because to me, they are the best team in the league right now. They've certainly been the most impressive team to me.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against them right now. 7-0, undefeated on the season. Great points there. But since you brought up JV Bickerstaff, talk about an impressive win here Monday night. The Detroit Pistons beat the Los Angeles Lakers 115-103. So a big win for Detroit that is starting to show some signs of life there. They've won their last couple of games now and seem to be headed on the right track. So do not sleep on the Detroit Pistons, as Bruce had pointed out in the preseason with his early season predictions. As for my final thought, I just want to let everyone know Vince Carter's retirement in Toronto went extremely well over the weekend. It couldn't have went better. I couldn't have asked for more. I mean, he got a court dedicated to him in the city. The city also painted him a mural. Air Canada, the airlines, not just his nickname, but the airlines customized his own plane. There's a plane now that has him on the outside of it, which is pretty cool. I'm hoping to see that at some point. I know the odds are slim there, but if I'm ever at the airport, I'm definitely going to be looking for the Air Canada gates so I can see if the Vince Carter plane is there. And last but certainly not least, I think Vince now has the NBA's coolest retirement banner in the league. Not sure if you fellas were able to catch a glimpse of the little ceremony they had unveiling that, but it has a picture of him dunking on it, has his number 15. Very trendy. It's not the classic look that we're used to seeing with numbers. So I thought it was a cool touch for the first Toronto Raptor to have his jersey retired, and it was much deserved on behalf of Vince Carter. So glad he had a great time, and hope you guys had a great time listening to this edition of the 48 Minutes podcast on 48 Minutes presented by Bet Online. And want to thank you for tuning in here on Believe, and we'll be back with you next week to be sure you're up to date in 48 on all things around the association. Take care, everyone.